Welcome, folks. Chill is in the air. Winter's around the corner. There's also chill, obviously, globally with what's happening in the Middle East, Israel and Hamas. It's an extremely treacherous and dangerous time for the world, and India and the rest of the world. And there's a lot of the chatter going around which is based on morals, right? Morality. Obviously, killings either way, whether it's Hamas killing and the way they took down and butchered the children in Israel, or the retaliation that's coming from Israel is not sanctioned by any democracy, is not sanctioned by any benchmark of humanity. But hey, there is anger in Israel with what happened to them, and a lot of it that happened to them could be actually, they could take the onus for it, should take the onus for it, for the massive failure of intelligence and complete shattering of the myth of Israel invincibility, courtesy, obviously, the messy politics that are currently happening in Israel, courtesy Netanyahu and his hard right law minister, right? But when you look at the blame game, right? It goes down to history and also remember geography, and I'll explain it to you why. But it's history, right? History is again, who's it written by? Generally by the victors, or more often, when did it start, right? And this particular region, as Shashi Shakkar rightly puts it, West Asia's trauma and double speak. But what is important? Let us talk about the land that has a direct link to 3 prophets and 3 religions. Those born here, however, are cursed to suffer for generations. The most recent example is the terrible massacre taking place in Israel, the Gaza Strip and adjacent territory. 3 religions were born here, right? Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. So there was going to be a lot of, obviously the history depends on whose history it is. Does it belong to the Israel? Does it belong to Islam? Does it belong to Christianity? But remember, geography has a huge role to play in this too. Why do I say that? Just let's look at Russia and Ukraine. Everybody says it's Russia's, a lot of the left says that it's Russia's birthright to have control over Ukraine. But remember, Ukraine became part of USSR only in 1922. Before that, like I said, who writes history, right? And who draws the borders? Then what about Sykes and Picot? 1916, when the Ottoman Empire was broken up, an secret agreement between France and Britain, along with Italy and the Russian Empire, created the borders of the Middle East, which have always been stable. Then what about the Durand Line, 1893? The British created this line between undivided India and Afghanistan. Problems there always. Then closer to home, look at McMahon Line, created in 1914 in Shimla between India and Tibet. Again, the British. We are having problems there too. Then look at the most recent Radcliffe Line, 76 years ago. India always had problems with Pakistan. So history and geography. So, and as violence of pure identity, Sanjay Srivastava rightly writes, Palestine-Israel conflict is a reminder of the dangers of flattening shared histories. Okay, the historical roots of contemporary Israeli-Jewish identity lie in acts of forgetting actual relations on the ground and reaching out to a mythical ancient textual past. Brute force, both Israeli and of its Western allies, has ensured periods of unstable and inherently fragile peace. It can only ever be this way in all contexts where identities and aspirations are either fostered or constrained through the force. For force always attracts a counterforce and resistance, particularly on the part of those who have nothing more to lose. This is important for all of us to know, right? And so the other thing, that big thing that happened was President Biden's visit to Israel. First president at wartime, right? But the important takeaways from there was, while he spent a whole bunch of time and it got the Arab street extremely angry at this full-blooded support to Israel, and he doesn't really have a choice. Let me just tell you too. And this goes back to the Zionist Christianity linkages way back when, right? But do remember this, right? And also when we're talking about geography, Israel is a part of the 1948 post-World War resettlement of the Jews, right? So everything, history, British seem to be involved everywhere, right? Maybe take the blame for it, right? But for Israel, this is the important part. This says, thank you, President Biden and the United States of America, for your unwavering support of the state of Israel. But this too, remember, Israel without the United States is flying a kite. It really cannot. It's only doing what it does because it has, the US has its back. And please, everybody must remember that, including Netanyahu, before he goes and takes on the world, because he's putting essentially the United States at big risk. But Biden made a point, right? While he spent all his time supporting Israel the way he has to, he also ensured, he said that the war, we are democracies, the war must be fought under the laws of global wars, and civilians cannot be targeted. And this was a message directly to Netanyahu. Netanyahu and his angry. Now, of course, Israel is extremely angry, and the Israelis are extremely angry. But point of the remember is that he and Blinken also attended a war meeting of the cabinet of Israel, not of the United States. So you can see the pivot position that the president of the United States has. And the other important thing to remember is this is the unity government, and it has Gantz as part of the government, which means now, as you can see, while everybody says the ground attack is imminent, it has not happened so far because the United States is getting its message across. And I'll tell you what, right? Biden sets Israel trip in show of US born. US in last-ditch effort to reduce impact of Israeli assault on Gaza. Biden visits Israel as hundreds die in Gaza hospital. And what the United States is really concerned about today, right, is the larger conflict, because it also knows that really Israel really can't win this war and have a two-front war. So it's basically sending a message and saying that, hey, look at what happened to us in Afghanistan. We did that out of revenge, but it left us in shambles and sent us back 15 years. Fears of wider conflict as Iran weighs options. Fears about a second front grow, like I said. Blinken tries to prevent conflict spread. War shifts global dynamics. And this is where the sands are shifting, right? And the people who say that the US, it works in US's favor because of its arms lobby, are completely off the mark. Because what this has done, this war does, is again allows Russia and China to slide in where the US was getting a better grip over the world, right? What it says is very clear. Israel-Hamas conflict relives pressure on Russia, Iran, and China, detect opportunities, war shifts global dynamics, and this is what's happened. The winners are Russia, China, and Iran. So what he says is, Dubai, the war between Israel and Hamas isn't just risking a regional conflagration, it is also affecting the global balance of power, stretching US and European resources while relieving pressure on Russia and providing new opportunities to China, right? And like I said, China and Russia hardened stance on Gaza as conflict widened global rifts. Then you have war tests US defense sector strained by Kyiv demands. And then you have this person, Stephen M. Watt, rightly right. Israel could win this Gaza battle and lose the war. What he has to say is very important to hear. Right? He says, the novel feature of this latest round of fighting is that Hamas achieved near total surprise and has demonstrated unexpected combat capabilities. The attack inflicted more harm on Israel than any of its previous operations. More than 700 Israelis have reportedly been killed, with death toll expected to rise, and an unknown number have been captured, including some IDF soldiers. Never happened before. And this, like I said, the big news in India got this, which was Congress SAD condemned Army's absence at Agniveer's funeral in Punjab. This is the first Agniveer that's been killed. And why I bring this up is, just like politics, interference in intelligence and institutions in Israel completely destroyed their ability to nail this total failure. The same thing, Agniveer is a process thought about in some political la land, and it's going to result in just this, a weakened Indian army and weakened Indian military institution. That's the only thing that's been holding us up, right? War in Gaza is Israel's moment of reckoning. It's more sure, certainly is. The scale, audacity, and barbarism of Hamas attacks have generated immense anger within Israel, causing the latter to launch its military retaliation. How the Israel-Hamas hostilities will play out remains unclear. Israel is a dominant actor in the conflict by a considerable margin. Its political leadership has decided to respond ideologically rather than pragmatically to the Hamas-led attacks. Gaza is being reduced to rubble and an invasion seems imminent, but it would come at great cost to Israelis and Palestinians, and the conflict will remain unresolved. Israel needs to change course. It needs to rethink its national narrative rather than emphasizing the condition under which the state was established. Israelis should ask if the policies of the state, even 1948, have really made them secure. He says, Hamas deserves punishment, Palestinians don't. What they deserve is a viable Palestinian state. It is in Israel's interest to commit to one, but Israel is failing to see its moment of reckoning is a story for future historians. Then you have Mr. Security, reputation of Netanyahu suffers a blow. So the biggest loss has been the reputation of Israel and its invincibility, and Netanyahu is a diminished leader. And the way he was begging to the body language with Biden, plain and simple. US warns Iran not to escalate Gaza war into broader Middle East conflict. Protests flare outside Israel embassy and Downing Street. So this is the worry for the world. Is the Arab anger, not just on Arab streets, but Arabs are all over the Western world and in democracies, right? And you can't stop them. Bodies of 200 civilians pile up outside hospital as blame game threatens stability in the Middle East. So here's the thing. So when Biden was flying in, he had this summit planned with Jordan and Egypt. They called it off right after this bombing of the hospital. Now the problem is the US and its intelligence community says that it's actually a misfired missile that came from a rocket that came from Hamas. They say, on the other hand, it's an attack from Israel. But hey, who's going to say? Because the opinion on the Arab street is that Israel did it. And that's what really matters at the end of the day. Hundreds feared dead in Gaza hospital blast. Angry protests across Muslim world after hospital strike. What's really dangerous about this Israel-Hamas war is written by Ayid Sezer. He's a Turkish political analyst. He says the gradual erosion of Israel's secular identity and a radical Islamist outward fronting the Palestinian cause have wider, nastier implications far beyond the Middle East. That's true again for what's happening with Tayyip Erdogan and also closer to home. Expel Israel ambassadors, impose oil embargo, Iran to Islamic world. Arab world blames Israel for hospital strike in Gaza. Jordan cancels summit with Biden, Sisi and Abbas. Like I said, then you have Blinken meets resistance from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, because the street is really, really angry. Outrage over Gaza city hospital deaths, protests Royal West Asia. Looming Israel ground attack sparks fears of wider conflict. Israel says it's resolved to destroy Hamas unshaken. Hamas is history, right? Don't repeat US's rage-fueled 9/11 mistakes. Biden tells Israel, and Blinken's been saying it all the time, right? The ground offensive could be bloody and ensnare other nations, analysts say. An unwinnable war, writes Sarjan Shah. He says the true aim of the attack by Hamas is to start another cycle of violence between Israelis and Palestinians and derail peace efforts. See, then you have Egypt. Sisi rejects Gaza refugees. Influx blames Israel for aid blockade. Diplomatic tightrope. Delhi red flags terror. Reiterates stand on Palestinians. And I think our Prime Minister made a big error. The Foreign Ministry had to step in. What do you have here? Kyiv worries that allies' attention and aid will shift to the Middle East. Like I said, that's the problem, right? Who's the gainer? Russia. Z finish in a fresh effort to woo Global South and Belt and Road Forum. Just the right time. China, Turkey seek to align BRI with Middle Corridor. Turkey had recently decried IMEC, which it aimed as rivaling BRI in the region, right? Turkey against it. China attempts to mainstream Taliban via Belt and Road Forum. And these statements I find extremely amusing. Several mega projects on way for IMEC, says Modi. Corridor will transform picture of new global trade. India, Europe and Middle East economic corridor will create jobs. Sure, it would have. But hey, without Israel, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, it ain't going to happen. In this war, most of the global analysts are saying that I2, U2, the Abraham Accord, Saudis' rapprochement with Israel is almost all but dead. And then we have yesterday, but our Prime Minister, on the other hand, thinks differently maybe. And look at this little news. And like a little Chief Minister of Uttarakhand. Uttarakhand CM in UAE, several MOUs in. Hey, what's he doing there? Putin says world conflicts threat strengthen China-Russia relations. Biden and BB and Xi and Putin summits reflect new international global divisions. They don't do that. Absolutely. Don't do what terrorists want, is what Arjun Subramaniam writes. Why disproportionate application of force, which is Israel's response to Hamas, never works. India knows this well and practices it no matter the provocation. Even if only some Hamas cadres survive, they will gain a new generation of hardline recruits, not only in Gaza but in many other countries. Soon the reality that Hamas started it will fade, and the group of it and or its proxies will leverage the humanitarian crisis. And then what do you have here? You have questions for Netanyahu. Who takes charge of Gaza? Right? He says a ground offensive against Hamas without a plan for Israeli military to exit the strip will be disastrous for Israel and Palestinians. There are simply no takers for reoccupation. Absolutely none. Then you have, will 220 be a decade of disruption? Can India profit from it? First COVID, then China's aggressive rise, then Ukraine war, and now Middle East conflict. How Asia's third largest economy can use the churn to its benefit? It can, but I doubt it will. Why? Because there's shadow of the sheikhs on Gaza. Without the sheikhs, without the Americans, we really can't shape the world economy, right? Like Israelis, hardliners, Arab regimes don't want a democratic Palestinian state. Such a state may well threaten governments defined by the king's emirs theocracy formula. Israel, a sanctuary state for Jews, was envisaged as a democracy, not a place where non-Jews would be subjugated. Yet Palestinians subsist as second-class citizens, essentially stateless. And that is a problem. And why it's happening is because disruptive energies of a new conservative order. He says, for now, all one can do is demand accountability and the application of international law uniformly, consistently, and unambiguously. If the US can't do this, then other countries, including India, must. The Palestinians and Armenians deserve dignity, dignified livelihood just as much as the Israelis and the Azeris. US officials press Israel to address crisis. Diplomats around globe. Endgame in Gaza confront hostage crisis. Israel seeks to wipe out Hamas. Pentagon to surge thousands of troops towards Israel. US-led push to open Gaza crossing falters as Biden weighs Israeli visit, right? Gaza humanitarian crisis grows as US bid to ease blockade falters. But I think he succeeded. Teenage sisters among Britons missing in Gaza. Hundreds feared dead in Gaza blast. British girls missing after Hamas terror attack. Then you have Ottawa announces new special envoy tasked with combating anti-Semitism. That's another big part. Then you have deadly attacks renew Europe's terrorism fears. And finally, critical supplies stuck at Egypt-Gaza. So this has been a deliberating attack. There is a lot to it. My next one will really open your eyes as who actually can be blamed. But till then, folks, Jai Hind. There is no morality about this. This is just geography, history, and some hot-headed leaders at this time in the world. 3 cheers, Jai Hind.